Howdy you lot, hope you're all well and dandy. A little bit of an overdue video here, but I'm sorry about that, it's taken me a while. I've got a lot of stuff on at the moment, a bit busy. But one of the things that people seem to really struggle with is their throttle trims and setting up throttles, because a lot of the time when you buy a Nitro car, even out the factory brand new, the throttle and brakes ain't set up. And if you buy it second hand, people don't set them up properly, they're all zipping all over the place. People keep asking me questions. When I start my car up, it revs up a lot. And or the other thing is, they go, when I put the brakes on, it don't tick over, it cuts out. Let's see if we can solve that problem for you. They're very simple things to solve. So, what you need to look at first, before you mess around with any of the things on the throttle, and I'm going to use this MP9 as an example because probably the Rush is a better example, or the Savage actually. I might have a look at that in a minute, but should be a good example. But we use this transmitter from, what's this one? The Savage's transmitter, because the MP9 one's a stupid gay digital one. So, you've got your throttle trim, which is the one TH trim. That's throttle trim, okay? So, you need to have that. You have to mess around with it. It don't just happen. You have to experiment with it, okay? Now, you need to, you can turn that, and that, open it up, and that will close it up, okay? So, you need it so that you're, when you let off of your, this might get a bit confusing for some of you lot, but it's the only way I can do it at the moment. So let's turn this around. I'm not very organised with this, I'm afraid. So what you need it so when you pull on the throttle, obviously it goes to full throttle. In fact, let's take the air filter off because that'll make it easier. Right, there we go. Take the air filter off. You might not be able to see down there, it might be a bit dark, I don't know. But you want it so, this is a slidey carb obviously, but if you've got the rotating ones, it's the same principle. Alright, so you want it so that when you let off the throttle, that's obviously full throttle, and you need it so that when you're on full throttle, obviously you've got, oh, you ain't about to see down there. Hopefully you can see down there now. You know, you've got the whole throttle is open, okay? And when you're on tick over, that's no brakes, that's just tick over, there's a little gap. And you see that little gap when it's in focus. Hopefully one day I'll get a camera that focuses. Just on the end there's a little gap, okay? That's the gap where it's sucking in the air for tick over. So you need that, but we'll talk about setting that in a moment. Because now, if you watch that little gap, alright, when I put the brakes on, that little gap doesn't move, alright? I'm putting the brakes on, see? That little gap does not move. That's because I've got the carburetor set up properly. So, in order to set that up properly, the reason I had this turned around the other way, on the carburetor, some have a low speed, a mid speed, which these ones don't have, I don't think. Nope. And a high speed, okay? So 3 needles, but this one has 2 needles. Obviously low speed and obviously high speed. But there's actually another screw. It's a needle, but it doesn't actually regulate fuel. That's the tick over screw. Now, a lot of people seem to know about these. I don't know why, because every carburetor has one with some extent. But hopefully you'll learn something from this. So if you have a look, and I'm going to try and show you on different engines, but on this carburetor, you'll find them in relatively the same place. Let me go and get a pointer. Right, I've got a torch on the situation and I've got a screwdriver pointing. You'll find a little screw here. See this little black screw here? See, it goes in there, and that little black screw. All that is, that's a little stop, alright? So when you screw that inwards, okay, clockwise, all that will be doing is stopping the throttle from closing it, a certain way. There's no way I'm going to better get that right there. It's just a stop, alright? So the more you have that screwed in, the higher the tick over will be, alright? Now the reason, and obviously the further you have it out, the lower the tick over will be. Now the reason a lot of you are experiencing when you put the brakes on, it won't tick over, it cuts out, is because you don't have that screw screwed in enough, okay? All you got to do is adjust that little screw that I just showed you down there. On some engines like the Rush, the T15 and a lot of other ones, it might be on the back of the carburetor, and it might be a screw with a little spring wrapped around it. Alright, it won't necessarily be one that's in a little cave like that one is, but it might be somewhere. It could have it'll be a little screw with a spring wrapped around it, something like that. Alright, that's your tick over screw, and that is the sole reason, most likely, as long as you've got a nice tune on it, why it cuts out when you put the brakes on. And in some cases that might be turned up too high, which is why it revs up, and even when you put the brakes on and mess around, it don't go down because that's too high and the gap in there would be too big. So it's just a case of, I mean, for me personally and a lot of experienced people, you know, there's no, you just turn it where you want it and it's simple as that. But for those of you that don't know this, you need to experiment, okay? Messing around with any engine, but especially Nitro, but any engine, is all experimentation. You mess around with it until you get it how you want it to be. So that's what you need to do. You haven't got to take the air filter off and have a look at the gap. A lot of people would do that. A lot of people are like, well, I've got to take the air filter off and have a look at the gap. That's crap, total rubbish. What you want to do is have the air filter on, start it up, all right? If you've got the case where it revs up and you can't get it to rev down, obviously just turn that screw out. Turn that tick over screw out and you'll probably have no trouble. And then all you've got to do is start it up, warm it up, and then you can set your tick over from there, all right? So that should solve your problem when you put the brakes on and you don't get tick over. Another way you can adjust it, and this Kyosho, a lot of cars have these. You use these little Allen grub screws here, and you can move these up and down. Move them little silver things up and down. You know, that gives you different levels of things. You know, for example, that's the throttle one there. So if I was to move that further out, I probably wouldn't get full throttle. I'd have to adjust the trim again and everything like that. I set this like this because when it came out the factory, it was set so it never had full throttle. Even if you had it on do the trim, you didn't have full brakes then if you had full throttle. So you have to set things up so you get good brakes and you get full throttle. A lot of people don't understand that. I know, oh bloody hell, it's a bit close. I know a lot of people have got a Nitro car and they're like, oh, it's a bit slow. It's bloody slow, this car. And when I look at it, I'm like, well, you're not having full throttle, are you? You're only getting like 3/4 throttle. No, I'm on full throttle. Look, I'm pulling the trigger all the way. Yeah, but you're pulling the trigger all the way, but your bloody throttle ain't opening all the way up because you ain't set up properly there, my friend. I set it up and they're like, good God, that's bloody quick now. You know, it's all about playing around. Don't be scared to play around, yeah? Just, you ain't gonna kill nothing. Just play with it. How do you think you know? I mean, how do you think you learn? And playing with things is how you get through life anyway, you know. Some of you lot have got the same sense of humour as me. You'll understand what I'm trying to say. But you just got to play around with these. But before you mess around with these, yeah, or if you've got like a Rush where you've got the twisty things, or if you've got a Savage, got a bit of an extension cable wrapped around it at the moment, but on the Savage, you've got the little twisty things on the end of here to adjust your throttle, and obviously you can move your servo horns around. You've got your brakes here where you can adjust, or you can move the servos on there as well. That's the only adjustment really that you've got. But it's all just messing around. But before I would say, before you go messing with any of them, mess around with the trims first. Steering trim is ST trim. Focus. Come on. There we go. Steering trim is ST trim on any transmitter. Alright. Throttle trim is TH trim on any transmitter. That's what it means. Alright, so you just got to play around with it. But yeah, so I think that's covered most things. I think that should sort most of you out that are having these troubles. But like I say, the most common thing that I see and hear about is the no tick over when putting the brakes on. A lot of you will say, yeah, I can come off the throttle and have no, just let the throttle go and it will tick over. But the minute I put the brakes on, it cuts out. Well, that, like I've already explained, all you got to do is mess around with that little screw. Alright, the Savage has got the same screw as this. It's just in a different place. It's on the back of the carb. See that little black screw there in a little cave? Just next to the spring that holds the exhaust on. That's the tick over screw. And like I said, this engine, this K4.6, has the mid-speed needle here. A lot of people say don't adjust it, but I always do. Because, you know, you play around. That's how you know what things are like when you play with them. So, we've got 3 needles on here, but the tick over one is we're interested in. It's there. On the T15, it's a little screw with a spring wrapped around it, and it might be on other engines as well. Play with that before you fanny around with all the servos and whatnot else. And one thing, there's been a few people ask me, and there's probably many people have had this trouble as well. You start your car up, and it might rev up quite high. You know, and if you put the brake, if you do whatever, it won't go down. All I can say is it's very simple to determine whether it's a carburetor problem you've got or if you've got an air leak from somewhere else. Because if you just take the air filter off and you have a look down in there, if you have a look down at your throttle, some people call them sliders, butterflies, well, if you have a look down there and that's near enough closed like that and it's revving up, you've got a problem elsewhere, an air leak somewhere, or maybe it's just too lean, something like that. But if it's closed like that, you'll be alright. So if you're looking even that much gap, where are we? There, back there, can you see that? I don't know. I need I'm a very low budget person, you see that? I need more of a budget. I might have a bit better light in there. There we go. Right. So if you're looking down there, and that is where it's at, for example, somewhere around there like that, when you've not touching anything, that should be tick over. Well, you know, that's too high. That's the reason why you're revving up. You need it to be like that, or as closed as possible. Yeah, if it's closed like that, a lot of people don't understand. If that is closed, or has got a really, really small gap like that, it's near enough impossible for the engine to rev. Alright, it won't be revving. And you might have an air leak around the carb, or possibly on the bottom of the heatsink, or around the carb somewhere. That will cause it to rev. Running too lean will cause it to rev higher. But that is the only source of air. It should be anyway. So if that's always closed, you know, you should be alright. So if you're getting a rev up problem and you don't know where to begin to solve it, whip the air filter off and have a look at that. And if it is open, turn that screw out and that'll close that all the way down. And if it doesn't, then you need to adjust your trim. Alright? That's just something quickly to explain. If you open that up and the throttle doesn't close, just put the brakes on and see what happens. Well, I hope my very brief and quick explanation, I'm trying to help you lot out with that, has helped someone at least, because it's very simple, it's very easy to do. So, you know, those of you that are learning and not want to know what the problem is that you've got with your car, hopefully that's helped sort it out. It's all just playing around, trial and error, I'm afraid. You've got to experiment. Some things are easier than others. But a lot of time, what I've just explained is very simple to sort out. Any questions, put it in the comments and we'll go over it. Yeah, until then, catch you on the next one, dudes. And just be happy because life is bloody brilliant, eh? What's it all about? Fantastic.